So please help me welcome Dr. Shirley Lance.
Thank you, Chad. I am really glad to be here. Chad asked me several months ago if I would come and meet with you, and since that time I've studied you a little bit and I know what you're about and have read about the foundation. I like the theme you chose, Chad, the fact that the theme, and your board chose it as well, not just you, but I like building trust is building success. And in fact, I took that theme and used it for part of what I'm trying to do with you this afternoon. Keys to building successful teams from some unlikely sources. Now, I may be one of the unlikely sources you have because I'm a former preschool teacher who became a university president. The title of my speech is Building Trust Through These Wonderful Keys. Now, Kieran Egan from Simon Fraser University has said that the mind organizes best in story form. So I'm going to tell you some stories that I have lived and some stories I know about of some successful teams and what made them work. One of the teams that I experienced most was my own President's Council at the University of Memphis, which was the people who were my direct reports as well as other influential people who were on the campus. Those people are people that if I were giving them the key to the university, I would give them this key. Like people give the key to the city, well, I'd give them this key because they're people I can trust and they are people of integrity. Now, how do we build trust and integrity? How do we know that someone can be trusted and that they have integrity? Well, it's often based on their past experiences. How do we build trust and integrity? We build it by our family values, of course, what we learned from our families, and also by our past work experiences and accomplishments. Those things are what gave us the opportunity to build trust and made us people of integrity. Now, let me think with you about that. I know those people who worked with me closely for 12 years. I know the work they did, but I don't know all of their past experiences or past jobs. If I were doing a communications workshop with you right now, I'd have all of you have a large index card and you would write down every job that you have had since you got your first paying job. Because it's from those past experiences that we help develop the fact that we can be trusted as a worker, as a team member, as a contributor. Now what am I doing? I'm trying to be a speaker to entice people to believe in themselves and to believe what they have to contribute to teams. I think I lived some teams at the university, but I lived some teams much earlier than that. In fact, when I look at that job list, I think about all the things I learned from each position I had. My dad, who was a farmer all his life and only had one job all his life, said once to me, "Shirley, what's wrong with you? You keep moving. Can't you keep a job?" And I, of course, was stunned that he would think somehow I wasn't doing a worthwhile job and I had to keep moving. But that was his view of the world, that it's one job for your life and that's forever. But from our families and from our past work experiences, we learn that we can be trusted, but others learn that we can be trusted, that we can be trustworthy, and that we will do what we say we'll do, and we will be a good contributor to the team, that we'll get whatever project done that needs to be done. Now, years later, when I was when I became president of the University of Memphis. My father came to the inauguration, of course. He came to the inauguration, and it was his first time to meet a governor. It was then Governor Phil Bredesen. And my dad, in his usual fashion, leaned over at the luncheon to the governor and said, "Phil," he didn't call him governor, "Phil, I don't know what a university president does, but I know she'll give you a good day's work." Spoken just like a farmer would speak. Well, every day at the University of Memphis for 12 years, I did try to give a good day's work. And I can tell you that we had 2,500 employees, and we had most of them who were giving us a good day's work because they believed in the job we were doing, they believed in our mission, they had the right values, and some of those people I was able to promote through the ranks because I learned I could trust them. I remember one man who was working in our diversity office for years, and it came time to have someone appointed as the executive director. And no one mentioned his name to me. And I said, "Well, is he applying? And why isn't he applying?" He never thought of himself as an executive director or having that potential. But I remembered Lonnie Latham and the great job that he was doing. And I talked to him and said, "Why don't you throw your name in the pot? I'm not telling you you'll get the job. You have to go through that interview process and you have to convince that whole team. But don't give up on yourself because you know this job." And that's what's happened to many of you in your past work experiences. Someone believed in you enough to give you a job, but they also believed in you enough to promote you to another level of responsibility. But you know, there are times when you lose trust in people. Mr. Latham, I had gained trust in. But there are times that you lose trust in people. One time I made an assignment to a guy who was very knowledgeable, had a lot of skills, was a good communicator, and he wanted this particular project to be his, and I gave it to him. When he first started, he started with a bang. He was out there all the time getting things done, and I heard what a good job he was doing. Then suddenly, after about 3 months, I didn't hear any more about the project, and I didn't hear any more about the good job he was doing. And when I began asking questions, they said, "Well, he hasn't been around so much anymore," or "We haven't seen him out in public getting this job done." And I said, "Let me see him." So I asked him to come into my office. Now, I have to tell you, friends, I'm known as the steel magnolia. Do you know what that means? You know what steel magnolias are? If you're from the South, you know that term, steel magnolia. The police officers on our campus gave me that nickname, steel magnolia. And I thought, when I have this guy come in, Mr. Good Communicator, Mr. Know-It-All, Mr. One who's always had the plum projects, I'm going to have to be a steel magnolia because I was going to call him on the carpet. And in fact, I did. I won't tell you his name because many of you might know him. I know there's some Memphis people. So I called him on the carpet and I said, "Look, you remind me of an Aesop fable I know." Now here I'm going back to my preschool teaching, right? "You remind me of an Aesop's fable, the rabbit and the turtle, the tortoise and the hare. You jumped out on this project fast as you could go, got it launched, but now you're sitting on the side of the road asleep. And I need someone to be like the turtle who's going to finish this race." Well, he was really taken back because, frankly, he had been the golden boy for a long time. And I said, "What is going on with you?" And he said to me, "Dr. Raines, how can I regain your trust? How can I regain your trust? I said, well, I don't know, let me think about it. Because I was all prepared, frankly, to either fire him, demote him, or certainly to take the project away from him. And I said, come back tomorrow, just let me think. But he said, I just want to regain your trust. So when he came back the next day, I said, okay, what would you do to regain my trust? What's the job that you haven't done that will be necessary? And can you stand to be the turtle who goes step by step by step to get this job done on time and on budget? Or are you going to have to be the flashy guy who's out there out front? He said, I can do it. Do you think I gave him a second chance? Yes, I did. I gave him a second chance. I gave him a second chance because he convinced me. See, he had the information, he had the knowledge, he had the skills. Can do and will do are two different things. He could do the job, but he had to have the will to do the job. And we get trust and integrity by doing the job, but we also can lose it by not doing the job, not making the deliverables. But he did. And in fact, there's a terrific book about second chances that I want to just at least call to your attention. It's called The Sensational Salesman, a Second Chance Story. It's written by Dwayne Cummings. And I have to tell you, Dwayne and his wife Kim are in the audience today. But it's a story about second chances. I gave this guy a second chance, and he finished the project on time and only a little over budget. But he finished. Am I glad I gave him a second chance? Yes. You know, my dad would never give people second chances. My dad, the farmer. They used to trade work on the farm. You know about trading work, where two farmers go together and one works for one for a while and the other works for the other. Well, if anybody ever shorted him 1 hour or didn't do the job like he thought it should be done, you didn't exist anymore. He wrote you off. He didn't give people second chances. Fortunately, he gave a few of us in the family second chances, but he didn't give people second chances. Pretty soon, there weren't many people around for him to work with, because he'd written so many people off. Well, I also want to tell you about another situation where trust was lost. Jay Myers, who is the CEO, founder and CEO of Interactive Solutions, is from Memphis. Who's from Memphis? Is there anybody here from Memphis? Great. Jay Myers, remember his name. He started a company, and a few years into the company, things weren't looking right. And one of the officers of his company was embezzling money. Jay, who had worked very hard to put this company together, couldn't believe it, but he had to prosecute the man. He had to be sent to jail. Not only did he jeopardize Jay and his company, but the jobs of all those people who were working for Jay. Jay has now written about this experience, and he calls it hitting the curveballs, how crisis can strengthen and grow your business. Jay met with me. He was on the alumni board at the University of Memphis, and he met with me and told me this whole story and said to me, you know, it was not just losing trust in him that happened. I also lost trust in myself as a director, as a president. I lost trust in myself. And I said, based on this one person who did something wrong? And he said, yes, you begin to question your judgment. I don't trust my judgment about people anymore. I look at every person in the company and I think, are they going to do something that's going to hurt our company? Well, eventually, Jay got a new business plan, some creative ideas, and he and his wife, Valerie, mortgaged everything they owned and borrowed a lot of money to keep their employees employed and also to recover. The year that this happened, they had made $250,000. That was in 2008, the height of the recession. They were making money. But in 2016, J. Myers and Interactive Solutions made $11 million. Now, what can happen when you trust people? So he had to learn to trust all over again. There are people who are not worth second chances because they do something so terribly wrong. But a lot of us on our teams, on the people who work with us, there are people who deserve second chances. I do not want you to be like my dad who writes people off. I want you to be the kind of team member, team leader that trusts people because of their integrity, but there are times that all of us deserve a second chance. And this guy who worked with me was someone who deserved the second chance, and it paid off. And certainly, Jay's going through this paid off, and the person who's the highlight of the Sensational Salesman book, it's the story of second chances. Now, here are some keys that are my vehicle keys. This is the key that got me here to this conference from Oak Ridge, Tennessee, where I now live, to Nashville. Those are my keys. What are the keys that got you to your present position? In addition to the trust and integrity that you've demonstrated from your past position, what are the keys now that are the keys to who you are and to your success? Here are some keys: your drive, your skills, your knowledge. For some of you, it's sheer talent. For others, it's determination and perseverance. There is perseverance that's required of us. Or maybe you are that tenacious person that once you get that job or once you get the assignment, you are like a dog with a bone. You are not giving it up. You are holding on to it until you're finished. For a lot of you in here, in labor and management, it is your ability to work with others. You have this great ability to communicate well. I sat with some people from Y12 this morning who are great communicators. Your communication skills, your ability to get along with others and to work with others. You know, at the University of Memphis, there were lots of jobs and lots of job talents and lots of job titles as well. You know, I worked with people from maintenance and physical plant. I worked with the police force on campus. I worked with managers who managed housing and managed the hotel, and people who were in food service. And of course, the brilliant professors that we had at the university, some world-class talented musicians, and also some famous coaches, some of whom you know, some famous coaches. I'll tell you about one. His name is John Calipari. Many of you know John, especially Memphis people know John, and you know that he defected for Kentucky, left for Kentucky. He left for Kentucky, for the University of Kentucky, but when I arrived there, John was already the men's basketball coach. And if you know Memphis, you know we're known a lot more for basketball than we were known at that time for football. John Calipari came to the first reception for me on campus, and there was a long line of people to meet, wanted to see who that new president was, the woman who got the job, which was a surprise to a lot of people, especially a woman who'd been a preschool teacher. They couldn't quite figure that part out. But there was a big reception and people came. I saw John in the back of the line and people kept pushing him up ahead of others. They recognized him and was talking to the coach pretty excitedly. And when he got to me, he greeted me warmly, and I said, well, John, do you know C.M. Newton from the University of Kentucky? I had just come to Memphis from the University of Kentucky, where I was vice chancellor for academic services. And he said, of course, everybody knows C.M. Newton. And I said, well, CM and I worked together on athletic academic advising and all the athletic teams' graduation rates. And he had a startled look on his face, and he said, do you know what our graduation rate is? And I said, no, Coach, I don't. What is it? And he started giving me all these excuses. And I said, Coach, wait a minute. Why don't we talk about this tomorrow in my office, and I'd like you to bring the athletic advising folders for all the men's basketball players, and also be sure you check with the advising office to know what they're doing to help all these students. Well, he came back, and before John left for the University of Kentucky to be the head basketball coach, the graduation rate was 75% of all the student athletes. And the person who followed him, the coach who followed him, was Josh Passner. And Josh's graduation rate was 100%. Now, we can all blame John, or we could also blame the fact that nobody told him that this is the clear expectation. You can make no mistake about it. When he met with me the next day in my office, he knew. The clear expectation was that the players would know that success in the classroom was necessary if they expected to be successful on the basketball court. So we, as those who lead teams and lead people, also have a responsibility. We have to set some very, very clear expectations of what we want to have happen. So it is those things, the skill, the drive, the training that you've had, but it is who you are, your tenaciousness and perseverance, and what makes you the great contributor to the team. These are everyday keys. I'm sure you have keys like this on your key ring right now. These are everyday keys. In fact, these are the keys to my building, to my outer office where the administrative assistants work, and to my office. These are my keys that I use every day. But I heard a story about keys just a few days ago that really fit with this presentation. I have a friend who's a speech therapist. Her name's Teresa. She works in a large metropolitan hospital setting, and she works with a team that's called the Joint Therapies Team. The Joint Therapies Team is one where the physical therapist, the occupational therapist, the speech therapist, and the mental health therapist all work together in a unit. And her team leader was also her daily supervisor. And when I told Teresa that I was coming to make this speech about teams, she said, well, I can tell you about a team if you want to know one. And she said, every night when I go home, every night for a year, when I went home, I'd throw my keys on the counter and I'd say to my husband, I'd give those keys in tomorrow if I could find a different job. I said, what is it that would have caused you to feel like that? You're a respected professional. You've trained for this for a long time. She said, I'm trying. I'm applying for lower level positions. I'll give up the money I'm making now because I can't take it anymore. So I said, I thought hospitals were pretty good places to work, frankly. But I said, what is it that makes this team so objectionable to you? And she said, it's our team leader. She criticizes people. She shows favoritism in assignments. When we're in a meeting, she drags it on forever without making the right points. She may have a meeting one day and have one view, and another meeting the next day and have another view. And she's criticized me publicly in front of other people. And unfortunately, Teresa's story was one I've heard before. It's not just in Teresa's team, but it's on other teams. I'd like to tell you that all the teams at the University of Memphis are wonderful, successful teams, but they're not. There were some dysfunctional teams, and I've heard those same complaints from other teams as well. And I said to her, okay, I know you're upset. What would make the difference for you? She said, get a new supervisor, which is often the reaction that people have. Well, I didn't see her for a few months, and I saw her again. And I said, well, how's it going? Are you leaving? Are you getting a new job? Have you turned in your keys? Where are you going so I can keep track of you? And she said, I'm staying. I asked her why, and she was very blunt about it. She said, they fired that, fill in the blank. They fired her. She's gone. And the new person that we have, the new person listens, discusses decisions. We have good, productive meetings. And she's even encouraged me to say, we have new therapists coming into our office, and would you mentor them? Which was quite a turn from how she had perceived things to be. So, what changed for Teresa? What changed for Teresa was, it's a very important quote. It's by William Arthur Ward, and William Arthur Ward has said, flatter me, and I may not believe you. Criticize me, and I may not like you. Ignore me, and I will not forgive you. Encourage me, and I will not forget you. And I added this last part as mine, because as I was thinking about it for teams, I was thinking, and I will go the distance with you. Because if people encourage me, if people want me to do well, if the expectation is that I will do well, I will go the distance with them. So Teresa is happy again, but she is really encouraged because someone believed in her enough to give her mentorship of the new people. Now, here's those keys that I think can best symbolize the words communication, cooperation, and collaboration. You can't use keys every day and work on a team without having these traits: communication, cooperation, and collaboration. When I was being interviewed for the presidency of the University of Memphis, they just put my name in the newspaper and not my picture. So I decided to visit the campus incognito. Nobody knew who I was yet. They hadn't seen who I was, so I just went and visited incognito. You know, much like Undercover Boss. So I went and visited incognito. I went into every building on the campus, not every office, of course, but every building on the campus, and I selected some some offices to go in, and I watched the people interact with the students and with me. You know, the students are our customers. So I want students treated very nicely. There were some offices that I went in and they saw this older woman, so they got me first and ignored the students. There were some offices that I went in, the people were so helpful that they actually took the student to wherever the student needed to go, gave them the information, but also actually walked with them to the building where they needed to go. There were some offices where we couldn't get the attention of the receptionist away from the phone call that was obviously not university business enough to tell her what we wanted. And then she actually left her station, and here were the students and me sitting out there. Well, I left and the students left, and I couldn't help but think, did we just lose a prospective student because we didn't have that warm, welcoming environment? So one of the things I want you to think about with your everyday keys of communication is not just the communication that happens on your team, you know about that, but what's the first line of communication with your organization, with your customer, with your vendor, with your potential client? What's the first line of communication, and are they on the communication team? Because some of those people, most of those people in those front offices were on the communication team, but some of them definitely were not on that team. Well, you know, with the key to the building, if you're going to give somebody the key to the building, what does it mean? If you give them the key to the building, what do you think it means? It means that you trust them with the key to the building. You trust them to represent you. And sometimes giving them the key to the building, that sign of trust, is also we give those keys to people who will be the face of our organization. As president, I wanted a key to the building. There are others who want keys to the building too. And let me tell you about another person who gained a key to the building. Later in my presidency, the AD had resigned, the football coach was not there anymore, and here I was having the responsibility of selecting the next head football coach for the University of Memphis. Well, I never selected a coach by myself. I had always endorsed the coach that the AD selected, but he wasn't there anymore. And I had to get a coach right away. So where are coaches? They were at a coaches conference, just like you're at a conference. So we flew to New York to the coaches conference, and I had a selection team, and I had an agent who had selected from a search firm that had selected 4 coaches for us to interview. We interviewed the first 3, and I was so depressed. Nobody showed any excitement for our job. Now, granted, let's think about this. The University of Memphis at that time had not won a championship from our conference in well over 30 years, and we were ranked by the NCAA as the worst defense in the whole NCAA organization. Who could blame them for not being interested in our job? I wasn't enthusiastic. The selection committee wasn't enthusiastic. The search firm was apologizing for bringing them in. And I thought, I'm going to change this dynamic. I'm going to sell people on the University of Memphis. I'm going to tell them what a great place it is to work, what a great community it is to live in, how our fans, our students deserve better than we've had in the past in football. We want to be as good in football as we are in basketball. So I got my spiel. I was telling them what great academic, athletic advising we have, all those kinds of things. The fourth coach that was to arrive was late. Now, usually if you're late for me, you're not in the running. But he was late, and he explained it that he was in New York for the first time in his life. He got snarled in New York traffic, and he couldn't make it to us on time. He said, I even opened the taxi door, and I rushed out this last block to get to you. And he said, but listen, I'm here, you're here, fire away, let's get started. And I started my spiel. I was giving them the old pumped up, enthusiastic sale about our university and why he should want to be a part of us. And he said, Dr. Raines, drop that. Don't worry about that. I've checked you out, and I've checked this university out, I've checked that team out, and I'm still interested in this job. In fact, it was Justin Fuente who had been the offensive coordinator for Gary Patterson at TCU when they won the Rose Bowl. He hadn't been a head coach like the other people we were interviewing, but he had been key to their success. But I had thought, frankly, when I saw his resume, he's an offensive coordinator. He's not a defensive coordinator, and what we really need to do is improve our defense. But he convinced me. I said, well, what would you do, Justin? And he pulled a plan out of his backpack and threw it on the table, and he said, this is my plan. Here's what I would teach people about being champions. Here's the kind of discipline I would demand. Here's how I would go about recruiting. And here's what I think we can do at Memphis that Gary Patterson did at TCU when TCU wasn't winning anything either. And in my mind, I thought, hallelujah. We finally have a football coach who gets it. And he said, I've never been a head coach. You'd be taking a risk on me. And I said, Justin, I got to talk with the agent, and I need to talk to my selection committee. Before we got to the departure gate, we had decided that Justin Fuente was going to be our coach. Now, you know that Justin left the University of Memphis 2 years ago, is now the head coach at Virginia Tech, and he's going to play one of the biggest games of his life against UT, Virginia Tech and UT in the Bristol Speedway Dome, supposed to be the largest crowd to ever observe a football team. But I want you to know that I'm the person who gave Justin Fuente his first head coaching job, and he still sends me texts and says, thank you, Dr. Raines. Now, Justin deserved the key to the building because he believed in us, in what we were doing, what he could do. And that's what you want to do when you give somebody a key to your team or to your work environment. You want them to believe in you and what you do, not just you, but what your whole team does. But I also have another key here. I was an undercover boss before I got the job. And I also have this other key that was the key to my inner office. I used that key every day. And the people who supported me were my president's council, the vice presidents who were direct reports, and the major leaders in the college, but also the people who supported me were the administrative assistants, everybody who worked in my office. They were the people who helped us make gut-wrenching decisions. gut-wrenching decisions when the budget was short, when state legislature did not give enough to higher education, when the student enrollment was down, because when you graduate more people, you've got to backfill. You've got to fill in for that number to keep it going. Those were the people who helped me make those decisions. They deserve this key, the key to the university. But I also learned something which you'll be surprised about, maybe. I learned something about cooperation from our physical plant. Our physical plant people were hardworking folks, but one of the things we were going to have to do to get more students was to have more recruitment fairs. Now, recruitment fairs on university campuses are a big deal. We had Sound Fusion, our rock band. We fed people. We had tables set up around our beautiful campus. We set up the Rose Theater for a big production that we were doing. And we usually did only one of these in the spring. But we decided, since we had a better graduation rate, we were going to have to get more students recruited, and we needed to have 3. And the moaning and groaning I got from physical plant, because they were the ones who were going to have to set up all these tables, do all this decoration, and so forth. And I didn't even know about the moaning and groaning until my secretarial staff said, you know, physical plant is not going to be happy with you. And they've been fans of yours, but they're not going to be happy to doing 3 times these recruitment fairs. So I said, let's get them together. We got together in the Rose Theater, everybody employed in physical plant, and I gave them the same information that I gave the faculty and the recruitment office. I said, here's the number of students, here's how many we've graduated, here's how many more we're supposed to get in order to keep our funding, in order to have our budget. And I need your help. I ask for their help. I need your help. We need your help for the university to do its job. And I got some nods of appreciation, but most people left the building not really sold yet. And as I was leaving the building, I heard one person say, and I call this the red hat story, I heard one person say, well, I'm an engineer, and I didn't sign on for this job to move tables and chairs. And I almost went up to him. But someone else interrupted and said, well, I'm signed on. I'm going to make sure these recruitment fairs go really well. I'm supervisor over a division, and I even want to hire some new people, and we can't hire anybody new or maybe even keep all we have if we don't get our enrollment. I could have hugged her. She told my whole rationale right at that moment. So we had our fair. We had Sound Fusion rocking the campus. We had the beautiful fountain going on. We had wonderful food. We had a great production in the Rose Theater, and we did it 3 times. On the first time, after the first recruitment fair, I was exhausted. I'd been talking to parents. I had been emceeing the whole event. I'd been giving speeches. I was really tired. But I had promised the physical plant people that I would be there from the time they moved in until they broke down the setup. I wanted them to know that I appreciated what they were doing, so I was there. But I went into Rose Theater, and along the back seat was a whole row of physical plant people, and I sat down beside them as exhausted as they were. And the man in the red hat, a man I had seen around campus wearing a red cap, said, "Did we get our number? Did we get our number?" And I said, "Pardon me, our number?" And he said, "Yeah, the number of students we need." I said to him, "You know, we don't know yet. They have to actually enroll before we'll know our numbers. But I said, I'll keep you posted. And from that day forward, I sent a recruitment and an enrollment report to not just recruitment and enrollment and academic affairs. I sent it to the Red Hat Man and to Physical Plant because they were invested in our success. So it's all so important to us that whoever is invested in your team's success, whether they're on your team or not, we have to keep them in the loop, informed. We have to know that the critical decision that's being made in the front office has to be carried out, and here are the reasons, with people continuing to be informed. So that's another key. The key to the building, represented by Justin, the key to communication, represented by the people who are on those front lines in those offices, and the key to my inner office. But I also learned something from one of my students who worked in my office. His name was Adam. Adam worked with us for 4 years, and Adam, when he graduated, said, I'm going to give you a present, Dr. Raines. I said, what's that? We're supposed to give you a party. And he said, I want you to remember what I learned these 4 years when I was here. I said, wow, that'd be great. And he gave me a framed copy of this saying, that happiness is doing with a smile what you have to do anyway. He said there were a lot of jobs I didn't want to do. And I said, yes, I remember when you first came to work for us, you moaned and complained a lot. And he said, yes, but after 4 years, I can tell you that you got to do the jobs. They have to be done. And here's his words, without any bitching and moaning. You just got to do the job, because there's some things about every single job that's out there that we don't like to do. There just is with every job. And Adam had the maturity to know that. Well, if you've paid close attention to my key sign, you know that there were 4 keys on the key ring, and I only told you about 3. But there are 4 there. There's one more key, this little key. I bet if I had you get your keys out of your pocket, and you can do that later, I bet there's at least one key on your key ring that you have not the foggiest notion what that key goes to. In fact, I have a whole drawer full of these keys at home. When I find a key, I think, well, maybe I'll run into the lock, so I just throw this key into the kitchen drawer. Well, this little key is something else. This little key is the key of inspiration. I don't know what door it unlocks for you, but I want you to keep that key anyway as a reminder of inspiration. What inspires you? Is it your children and your grandchildren? Is it your church? Is it your faith? Is it what inspires you to do what you do? I know some people who continue to work at the University of Memphis because we have teams build habitat houses, and they love that. I know some people who work on teams that have hard jobs to do, but they do them because we're involved with Special Olympics. So sometimes it is the projects outside of our team that have the most inspirational meaning to people. But I'm going to challenge you to do something else with this inspiration key. All of us have to stay inspired to do the work we do. The workplace is changing. The workforce is changing. what is expected of us by our agencies, our organizations, and our companies, that's changing. You have to stay inspired for the challenge that's ahead of you. The challenge to, because you know, you are the people in this room who know how good teams work, how good negotiations can work, how good partnerships can work. And so you must stay inspired. Don't get discouraged. Stay inspired to get up in the morning and to do your job, for you to be inspired to be the decision maker, the problem solver, the one who, when things look like they're going downhill, that you are the one who can somehow pull people back together. So, we hold all these keys in our hands. All these keys are held in our hands. You hold them all. You don't carry around this big trust and integrity key, but it's in you. It's who you are. It's what makes it the fact that you're here as a responsible person for your team. And then there's the attributes that got you to where you are today in your present job. What got you to your job? Your knowledge and your skills, but it's also your perseverance and tenaciousness and your abilities to work with others. Those are already in the engine that drives you to work every day. But think about the keys that you use every day, the ones to your building, the ones to the outer office, the ones to your shop floor, wherever it is that you work. For those keys, these keys are dependent upon communication. And you can get better at communication. There are people you need to help on your team to get better at communication. There's lots of good communication training. I believe in LeaderCast, which has some good communication videos. You're having a speaker tomorrow, Sandy Smith, who does a lot of communication training. And there's a wonderful book I can recommend to you called 5 Voices, How to Communicate Effectively with Everyone You Lead. We can get better at communication. We can get better at cooperation because we know how to do that, and we can get better at really collaborating to do the jobs that are necessary for our future as workers, as an organization, as a management team. Those are possible for us. I want you to keep this little key, this inspiration key, as a sign that you're a seeker of how to do things better, because you already have all these great keys. Hold on to one more and stay inspired. Thank you, Chad. Thank you, Chad. Thank you so much.
I think the way she used the keys to tell the story about cooperation, communication, and collaboration was absolutely wonderful. Her stories were fascinating.
I think that the keys were a great visual tool for her presentation. I believe that the key to the communication, the key to her inner office, as she called it, I think that makes me more reflect on myself and my communication skills with the people that I talk to on a daily basis.
One of the things that she really did well was she could change topics, yet continue to keep me engaged, and then she tied everything together, that's a gift. I mean, just no matter how you slice it, that's just a gift.